Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast. We're your hosts, Monte Wyatt and Paul Szynski. Wherever you are in life, there is a higher ceiling. This podcast is how you become aware of it and how to take action to push through it. It's time to discover your ceiling. Before we get into this month's episode, here's a short message from Adding Zero's Executive Development. As CEO, you demand performance and results from your team. If you're committed to developing a cohesive, driven organization that achieves successful outcomes every single month, we need to talk. It's time to see how organizational and executive development from Adding Zeros can help. We focus on strategic planning, executive coaching, team alignment and engagement, organizational culture, and clarity of implementation. Contact Monte Wyatt by booking an appointment at www.addZerosNow.com. That's ADDZEROSNOW.com, AddZerosNow.com. If you're ready, now is the time. I have a few coaching spots available for 2025. Lock in your team today. Now let's begin today's episode. Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast, where we talk about your health, your family, your business. I'm your host, Monte Wyatt. If you are a CEO, an executive, or business owner, then this is the show for you. We call our audience the achiever because you're always striving for the next level. I am very excited for the conversation today. We have a gentleman who's gone from a family business ownership to private equity ownership, and he's had 35 years of experience in business management, financial management, energy development, environmental remediation, and renewable energy. He's the former CEO of Actera Group in Marion, Iowa, and he's currently the chairman of Cottage Grove Place in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Welcome to the show, Tad.
Hi, Monty. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your insights of what you've gone through, what you've been through, and what you've experienced, because I think there's a lot of good insights that our audience can learn from and gain some knowledge from. So really appreciate your time.
Glad to be here.
So would love to have you start off. Just give us a little history lesson about Actera Group and your own journey, I guess.
Okay, so Actera was actually started back in the late 50s by my grandfather. He was in the oil equipment business, and what he did was he worked for the old Standard Oil, which was Amoco, BP now. He was running around Iowa fixing old mechanical gas pumps for that company. Well, one day they fired all their independent guys, all their the guys that worked for him, and made them independent. Can't do that today, obviously. That doesn't work in today's rules, but you could do that in the late 50s. So that's how he got into business. And then my father was in college and down in Southeast Iowa, and so he came into the business there in the early 60s. And they were in basically just Southeast and Eastern Iowa, working on gasoline stations. They got into storage tank business in the early 70s because they couldn't buy steel storage tanks. There just weren't enough manufacturers, so that's how they got into that business. My grandfather died in 1976, and then my father, who was kind of a serial entrepreneur, took over, bought the business out from his mother and his brothers and sisters, and then just slowly developed it. Come up to the 80s and 90s. I have two brothers. We were all graduated from college in the 80s and 90s and got into the business at that time. And my dad slowly retired another 10, 15 years later, and we took everything over in the early 2000s. My dad was a person that he thought that we would always want to run our own independent businesses, and because that's what he did. He was a guy that he'd see a problem and he'd usually start a business for it. Back in the 80s, kind of dating myself, but when I was young, you'd fill your gas pump up with mechanical dispenser, mechanical pump, and you'd see the numbers run for the gallons. Then in the 80s, everything became digital because we figured out how to use networks and start using electronics. So he saw a need for an electrical company, so he went and bought one. And that's what he did, and just we got in the environmental business because of that. In the early 90s, late 80s, they were taking out a lot of leaking underground tanks. He was paying other companies to do that work, so he started it himself. and did it. And that's actually where I got involved in 91, 92, is I came into that business and learned that business from the ground up. So
Well, very good. Well, you've had a lot of good family generations. What, your third generation, is that right?
third generation. So my two brothers and I ran the business for the last 20 plus years together. But we all have, and I have a sister. We actually are in the banking business as well, and she runs that. But we all had three kids, and not a single one wanted to be the fourth generation.
Huh.
So we are in our 50s. I'm 56 now. My older brother was the CEO, and we were just a few years ago. We just were well, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago now. We were kind of looking at each other what we wanted to do with the business, and it just was getting a little harder to go in that same door I've gone in. I went in for 35 years, and not being able to pass it off to another generation. We just said, okay, what do we want to do? And we made the decision to sell it, put it on the market, and had some private equity buyers come in and take out the business. I stayed on for a few years. I just retired in the last month or two. Let new blood come in to run the business. My other family members had cashed out and were out of the business as well, so we're no longer involved. We still own all the property, still own that, so they lease all the business or all the offices and all the warehouse space from us, but that's the only thing we're involved with now.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, I definitely want to hear about your process of the private equity transition, things like that. But before we go down that path, uh, I want to talk about a family business for a little bit.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of business out there that have a lot of family members part of them, and it's always can be a challenge in communication and responsibilities. And I'd love to hear you share some stories or share your learnings of working with your siblings and how you determine roles and how you really work together to make it successful.
Well, from an early stage, I learned a couple times the hard way, that just because your last name was, in my case, Cooper, it did not all that matter. Results are what matter. I had a dad that was a very strong personality, and he made very clear to me when I was in my first few years that what, you had to work and you had to earn, and you had to take care of the other people that worked for you. Working with my brothers, some of the best times of my life, some of the worst times. Okay, no question. We had we had a lot of things that went really well, and we had situations where I thought one way and he thought 180 degrees a different way. And so, but what I always thought is, I always felt that no matter what, there was a hierarchy. I was not number one; I was number two. And so, what number one asked me to do, if I didn't agree with it, I'd tell him, but I would still do it. Okay, or I'd try to find ways to bring him around to my way of thought. So we had a made that decision together. So either we're both, let's say, both somewhat happy or both not as unhappy as possible. So meet in the middle, they always say, right? Make the deal better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So coming to decisions, you met in the middle. And is there times where you had to do more selling, more influencing than others?
Oh, no question. I mean, over 35 years, there are a lot of different situations. But really what it came down to is um, the biggest difference. And I'll go to my older brother because him and I were really running the business at the time. He had more of a I had more of a growth mindset, and he had much more of a, we're happy, we're doing fine mindset. I don't want to throw a bunch of money out to possibly grow. And I totally understand that. Even my father, I saw him change his mindset from when he was first really running the business, but when I was in it, to when he had retired. He was more worried about taking care of the next generation and the generation after that than worrying about the day to day. And so that was where my older brother and I had some times where we both didn't see eye to eye. But again, we made the decision together to sell the business, and that wasn't easy. I mean, no question, that was a difficult thing. Even during the transaction, there were so many ups and downs. I was shocked how many times I thought it was going to fall apart because of whatever. But we made it through and sold the business.
Oh, very good. Just a couple more thoughts around the family business. Is there anything you had to learn or grow in a skill set as you work in a family business to navigate the atmosphere and grow in your skill sets to get there?
Well, you had to learn to be humble, that's for sure. And
Mm.
sometimes you had to learn to shut your mouth because I was pretty good at opening my mouth, and so I learned that you didn't always say what immediately you thought. And there were times where being young, being in that 30, 35 range, again, you always think you know everything, and then until you're 55, you figure out you know nothing. So, but yeah, dealing with people, dealing with longtime employees, okay, that had been there longer than you, and making sure that trying to earn their respect, not just kind of pull it out of them by whatever decision you make. That was probably the biggest thing I learned is some patience, learning how to get that 25-year veteran to respect what you thought, and that was an important thing. And I see it today when even at the end of my career with Actera, I saw it where I had one gentleman that I think is going to be he's a great employee, going to be a rock star. And I kind of kept counseling me. You just got to let people make mistakes and then help them fix that mistake and move on. Don't let them make a huge mistake so it costs us lots of money. But he was ready to jump on and pounce on anybody that might possibly make a mistake, and you could see where it was causing us issues with people, and so that lack of trust by a manager, to me, I learned that pretty early that you got to really get the trust from your employees. Even yeah, it's funny when I was on it was the same young guy. His name was Josh. We owned a bunch of properties around Cedar Rapids, and one a few winters ago we were out and it snowed, so I went out to guys to help them shovel, and one of the kids that was with his kids, I don't know, maybe he's 30, I don't know, kid to me. So he was complaining that he didn't sign up to shovel snow. He was a technical guy, and then his boss, as Josh said, well, that guy over there is the CEO of the business and he's shoveling snow. So maybe you could just shut your mouth and do the work. But that's what you got to pitch in, and you can't be afraid to, get your hands dirty, so to speak.
I want to reinforce something for our audience, the achiever. You said a couple things in that last segment of letting people make mistakes and then help them work through it. And that's building trust. That's allowing people to learn different things and try different things. And that's how you gain respect and that's how you build trust. So I love that you shared that. And that trust is, just like scooping snow. That's building trust right there. I love that. I love that. Well, wonderful. Well, you know, so let's go down the path of the transition to private equity
Okay.
and tell us a little bit of how you did the vetting process, how you chose someone that you wanted to partner with, and what that looked like and how the process went.
So we had obviously we hired a investment bank to put our book together, ran the book, and had a handful of suitors. Most of the companies wanted to simply bolt us on to them, okay, which was fine. But in my eyes, I wanted to have a company that was looking more for a platform and start a platform. And if I was going to still be active, that's where I wanted to be. And so we went down the road with this company. It took about 3 months longer than I thought it would. We were going to close at the end of 2022 and end up closing on March of 2023. But due diligence was interesting. I've never seen as much legal and accounting work done
Hmm.
on what I thought was a fairly small transaction. And so, but that's the way this company worked. That's what they wanted. They're investing, they're taking their and other people's money, and they really thought it was that important to make sure everything was vetted, and that's fine. So
Yep.
some of the
So,
things I questioned, and I still questioned afterwards, and I questioned with their lawyer afterwards, and she laughed at me, but that's okay. So,
so how did you ultimately choose the best suitor?
well, it was this. It was literally they were the one that wanted to do that platform. Had a good price, had the price we were, interested in giving, and so it really was that. Um, they were Midwest based, so that was a big thing. They liked what we were doing as a business, and their idea of growing it from a small family business to much larger really what we wanted to do. Instead of just saying, okay, we're a, here's another $20 million business that goes on to that $100 million business and just be an office in Iowa. So
Yep.
that was a real interest.
Oh, very good. As you went through that process, how did you have to change in your beliefs or your mindset as you're working with that third party and going through this process? How did you have to change and grow?
Well, we had, what you learn is that we were I thought we were a fairly process driven business. We were, but the sophistication of outside investment is significantly different than we were used to. And, the phrase KPI, today drives me insane because there was just picture after picture after picture. And when you're in the business, you learn, I always thought I always learned that I needed to know all the numbers behind my numbers. So, but what I learned with this group is I had to be able to share that with them and show them, and that was the hardest thing over the first year especially.
Hmm.
Is I had a controller that wasn't well versed in that. He was more put the numbers into on paper and regurgitating back out in a financial statement, not really know what whys and whats of the business and the financial side of it. My brother and I actually that's what we did for the last 10 years is we lived in our financial statements. So I didn't have to do that because the two of us already were doing it
Yep.
for ourselves. So, but getting that out of me, getting that out of that financial statement to board members, to investors, became the most important thing for us is just turning what we were already doing, and so we're doing it fine. It just we weren't showing it very well, and
Right.
it's hard to understand from the outside the 35 years of what I knew. And so I struggled with that. I'll be honest, because I'm on many different boards, and so I see why it's important. But I was so close to it that was a learning lesson for me to make sure that those investors saw what we were doing as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've been through a lot of positions. You grew up in the business, and tell us how um, as you went through changing roles and gaining more responsibility, how did you change your belief system as you went from just a sales role to management to CEO? How did you change your belief system?
Yeah, actually, I started out soil and groundwater project manager. So I was putting it, doing sampling, all that kind of thing. So yeah, you open your eyes. First off, you grow up. Okay, I mean, when you're 25, like I said, it's just like hard charge, get your work done. Don't know much about all the backstory of the business. I know we've had a business for that long. I didn't know all the things about it. I sure didn't know anything financially about it, other than the little bit my dad told me at the time. But you just grow up, and you start taking on more parts of the business, and you start diving into more areas with the different people. And then, like I said, what I did is I, you know, I have a business degree, but I'm not an accountant. So I had to learn accounting and I had to learn how financial work and just that part of the business. Once I started understanding that better, once I started understanding risk and where our real risk pieces are and how we mitigate risk, and those different things, that's where I really grew up in could take over the business.
Hmm.
That took 15 plus years, 15 to 20 before I really understood what my dad worried about.
Sure.
And every day you walked in, and what did you worry about? You worried about the 50 plus people that were under your roof. Okay, that every single one went home safe. That was number one. Okay, number two, are we taking care of their families long term?
Yep.
Number three, are we paying our bills as timely as we possibly can, and are we getting our money from every customer that we're asking for? And then the last thing is that we're living up to what we asked or our customer asked us to do. And sometimes your staff forgets that the guy that's signing your check is actually your customer, and that we agreed to do 10 things, and if we didn't do all 10, he probably shouldn't sign us a check. and let's not fight about it. Let's go fix that 10th thing and let's get our money and move on. But there are a lot of reasons why things don't get accomplished, and usually they're excuses. And you just got to get rid of the excuses and get the thing done. And that's what of all things, I am one that I I don't want to hear why you didn't do it. I want to hear how are we going to finish it, and let's go get it done.
Yeah.
And that my employees would tell you that the guys that were close to me over the last 5 years, I never wanted to hear your weed story. I never wanted to go deep into the reasons why you didn't accomplish something. I want to know how you're going to accomplish it now, and then you tell me when it's done so I can make sure it's completed. And that's, it's just so many people want to give you reasons and excuses, and but your customer doesn't want that. They just want the job completed the way you said you'd do it, and get paid and move on.
Absolutely. That's a great concept of ownership. And the why doesn't matter. It's how we're going to fix it. How are we going to get to the result that they're after and getting the right outcome that we're going towards. So really appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned risk a few minutes ago.
Hmm.
Tell us about a big risk that you've taken through the years that caused you to grow or change the business, but you had to convince some other folks to get there as well.
Well, this transaction was probably the biggest risk, is because we had six stockholders, and so we had to, even to get to a purchase agreement, we had to, there was risk that it would never go. I mean, when I think of risk, I think more of some of the situations that my employees got me into, and we had one situation where, and so I kind of gauge my level of risk on the situations I've been in my life. And I will never forget one time where an attorney of mine who's a good friend, known him for a long time, and so looked at me and said, "You better settle this, or it's going to cost you $1 million." And I think we settled for 100,000. A mistake that was made by one of my employees that we didn't even know was going on when it's going on. But when people talk to me about, well, I'm afraid of doing this or that, I said, wait a minute. I'll tell you about risk. It's like on a Friday afternoon when you're sitting, you get a call from your attorney and he says that, and you've got all weekend to think about it, and on Monday morning you're in the shower thinking, oh my God, this could, cost this much. That's where risk comes out. And so I learned to weigh those things. Is like, okay, if someone's gonna, the thing about business, it's funny, is I try to explain to people that, business, no matter what business you're in, you're going to end up in a lawsuit somehow, some way. I hope you don't, but you're going to. Um, and so it's like, okay, what did you do to get out of that risk? Did you lower your risk by your insurance, by, whatever you did? And so I always weighed decisions based on that. Is if I had a, insurance policy for a certain amount of money and I had a $50,000 deductible, that was my risk.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all it was. It was just numbers. And a lot of people start getting like this and worry about their heart and all that when those things happen. And I learned to try to be even keel with every decision and really weigh that risk up and down. And what was it really going to do to the business? Now, the time and the heartache, no, you can't get that back. I get it. But taking the risk, when someone, a situation like that happens, it's just, you got to make the decision fairly quickly, or you're going to just brood over forever.
I think that's a great trait, being even keeled when you go through challenges like that, because our emotions can get to us. Our emotions can cause us to make bad decisions and do bad actions. And so
Oh, yeah.
you got to make sure that we're making the right decisions based on logic and information. So I love that you shared that and reinforced that. So that's one.
I tried to teach that in some of my people that work for me. Is I loved winning a deal, loved it. Okay, that was probably the of business. That was probably the best part of any day in business, when someone closed a deal. That was great. However, I probably lost 20 times as many deals as I won. So you and I wouldn't be talking. I'd be in Bahamas somewhere on
Yeah.
my private yacht. But so it's like you have to just go with the ups and downs and just stay even, or you'll drive yourself crazy.
Yeah.
Because if you get too up, too down, the next day something will happen to change that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, very good. I want to go to the personal side. You know,
Okay.
you've been a busy fella. You got a lot going on. You've had a lot of responsibility. How did you manage, or how do you manage your personal life, your family, and continue to get the work done as well?
Well, first off, I have a great wife, 32 years now. And so we've got, she helps me on all types of things. She keeps me centered, that's for sure. She definitely doesn't let me get too full of myself over the years. But I've got three kids. They're now two daughters that are married, one son that's finishing up school, and they're all doing great. I even I have a granddaughter now. She's almost a year old. You talk about changing your mindset. I learned that from my dad when we all started having kids. Being a grandfather is way different than being a father, and it's just so much more fun. But the business still had to be taken care of. And you still had the responsibility because you had the responsibility of all those other families, making sure that they were taken care of. And so, whether it was like you get up at 6 in the morning, you get your the work by 7, you do your work, you're doing work at night, you're doing work on weekends, whatever. I don't think I missed anything for my kids, so I was lucky that way. I was able to volunteer their school, their sports, that kind of thing. We went to all their different events, um, and part of that is because of the freedom of owning our own business is that I was able to take off at a three in the afternoon, go watch a soccer game, and then go back. But I was still working at night,
Yep.
And I say working, you might be answering some emails, you might be, it wasn't like I was, deep into anything. But even on the weekends, you still would pick it up because it was always in your mind,
Yep.
and that's just how I grew up in the business.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
been the oddest thing, I'll tell you. Since I retired a month or two ago, I was just talking to a friend of mine in Atlanta who retired a couple years ago. He's the chairman of a much larger company like ours. And he said, yeah, he's like, it's interesting, isn't it? You wake up a little later, you go have your coffee with your wife, that you never saw before, because I was always gone before she'd get up. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of nice actually. So now I'm trying to figure out kind of the next stage, but that's all right. That'll come too. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it. Well, as I think about growing and ceilings that you break through, how would you say you're different today than you were 3, 4 years ago?
It's an interesting question. Um, I would say this granddaughter has humbled me a little bit more. I look at it, and I always give my credit to my father because he was very into his kids, his grandkids, and taking care of everybody. But I'm not worried about us now. I'm worried about them, and what we can do to make their lives better in 15, 20 years.
Hmm.
This whole, kids can't buy houses, kids can't do all these things today with the economy. They say the cost of education is insane. So now my focus is not near as much on the now as it is in the future.
Hmm.
Whereas 4 or 5 years ago is definitely on the now and how much we could just go and how much we could grow and how much more business we could get at the time.
So how do you keep that focus on the future? What drives you and keeps you going down that path?
Well, I'm kind of in that little window right now that I'm starting a business with my daughter, getting her up to speed there. I've got a couple other things. This Cottage Grove place is near and dear to my heart. It's a volunteer position. I'm the chairman. I've been in the board for 15 years, but I'm always worried about the future of that place. So right now it's more about okay, what we have and how we position everything so the future is taken care of or somewhat taken care of. We're not gonna take care of everything for our children or for our grandchildren. But just thinking about education drives me. As soon as that little granddaughter is born, how do I put money in so she can have money for college? It's just that type of thing. Because when that little girl who turns 18 and 17 years from now, I can't imagine what school is going to be
Yeah.
when it's 200,000 plus today. So who knows? But it's just those kind of things and that is completely different than I was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, did not worry about that at all.
Hmm. How do you think that's changed your personal life? Just that focusing on the future. How's that changed you?
Well, so we've been lucky enough that one of our daughters moved back. She's the oldest one with the granddaughter. So we spend a lot of time with them. So that connection to family is huge. My wife's parents actually moved back here, there in their late mid 80s. And so they moved into the senior living facility I'm involved in. And that's been a huge issue. It's been great. They were in Florida, they were in Chicago. So we would only see them 3, 4 times a year. Now we see them minimum once a week. And it's funny. I read a book called on the 5 types of wealth by Sahil Bloom, and I'd recommend it because it's not just about money. One of the types of wealth is about time, and I read in there, and it just blew me away when he said, "Think about how many times you see someone for the rest of their life, rest of your life." And it's like, okay, so I'd see them 3 times a year for the next 5 years, maybe 15 times. Like that's wow. Yeah, that's 2 weeks. Yeah, so now we see them, once, maybe twice a week, and they were the same way. They did not want to live in Florida anymore when they had a great granddaughter. They had their granddaughter here. All that they wanted to be near us because they knew their time was shorter.
Yep.
And that to me has been probably the biggest change is just taking care of that time aspect in my life and making sure those things that are more important are being taken care of.
I'm really glad you shared that because I think that's we can't get our time back. And we can always make more money, but you can't bring your time back. And how we invest our time, not use our time, how we invest our time is so important. And I love that you have that with your family. That's great. That's great. You know, as you look at your current path that you're on as retirement, what's a ceiling that you're trying to break through now?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm retired yet or not. That's probably the biggest ceiling is I still have an itch and I'm not sure what's going to scratch that itch. And so I do, as I mentioned, I'm starting a business with my daughter, but she's going to be the one who does most of the work there. I'm just helping her with a couple things, money mainly, but that's okay. So, but it's what would for the next 3 to 5 years. I do not want to be the CEO of a business anymore. I did that, but there are so many interesting things out there going on. This AI stuff is just so, you know, foreign to me, but so interesting. So, being the old dog, I said, well, I need to learn some new tricks. So I signed up for a class through the University of Texas. I
Hmm,
start next week, just strictly on how you use AI in business and how you can. And I'm like, I'm looking forward to it. I've already started a few things, and because it just amazes me. Here in Cedar Rapids, where I'm at, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the data center construction is insane. I've got a good friend in the mechanical business. He said they're scheduled for the next 4 or 5 years
hmm,
of work on these data centers. And that's a tiny little microcosm of the industry. And
right.
most of it is because how this AI has exploded and how we all have exploded with our data. And so those things are really the thing I'm trying to figure out and break through is how I get involved in that because that entrepreneurial spirit is starting to get to me. Is like I have to find a way to get involved in this because it's just the train is it's on the tracks and it's going to explode and it's exploding already. So how do I get a little piece? That's what I'm really working on now.
I think that's a great insight because if any business today, if you're not looking into AI, you're gonna fall behind. So you've got to find a way, how can it benefit your business? How can it save you time, create efficiencies, reduce costs? There's so many tools out there that do different things, and AI is just amazing. It just blows my mind away. But you got to be learning it today.
Well, and I'd love to listen to Elon Musk talk, and I'm not a Tesla owner, so I didn't I'm not giving that out. But I heard him talk just the other day about AI and how it's going to change just the average worker. Is that most people are afraid that jobs are going to go away, and he said, well, there will be jobs lost, no question, but the welder is going to be such a stronger position than it was today because AI will take over parts of the welding, and just any pipe fitting, electrical, that kind of thing will become. So AI will help them, and so if you're in that, you're just going to be there are going to be jobs for your jobs. People are just worried about it's jobs going away because the person typing in something probably isn't going to be needed anymore. But I see the opportunity of most of us still don't have a clue what it does.
Right.
Chat GPT, it can help me write a paper or help me write a letter or whatever, so there's that. And all these other systems, you can throw something in and it'll spit something back out at you. But how does it help my business? If I wanted to design something, okay, how can I use AI to show me all the things that might happen in that design space, that when you're an architect, all they could do is they could do a few renderings and give you ideas, but they could never really go through the thousands of equations it would take
Right.
to understand it. That's what to me is super interesting. And so again, and I don't know how, I'm at stage 0.001 of learning this right now. So
Yeah.
I think and I think there's so many small businesses that may rely on it for a little bit, but have no idea how it could affect their business, in a much bigger way. And that's what I'm interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something that everybody's got to be putting time and energy into and learning. It's huge. It's huge. It's going to change all of our lives. I think so. Good. You know, a couple things I'd love to hear from you is if there was one or two tips as a CEO or a business owner that you could give to our audience to be successful, what would those tips be?
One would be make sure you get to know your people, okay, and what drives them. I was never one that I was, um, you know, super close friends with anybody in my business, but I wanted to know what drove them to be in the business, because that's how people are motivated completely differently. I may be focused on the financial reward, and someone else might be. I have to have 3 or 4 weeks of vacation, so I can always do that. Those things are important, especially if you're talking about your leadership team. Um, Knowing them. In fact, I had one younger CEO in that last business that didn't share a few things, and it kind of I found out after things happened that he was having some personal troubles, but he wouldn't share it. Okay, but you could see it coming out in his actual actions and in the business, and it affected the business for a few months. And so getting to that relationship, I didn't do a good job of getting that relationship set up after a year working together. It was more just strictly business versus business
Mhm.
and a little personal. I think there's got to be a little personal. Um, I knew some of the guys that worked with me for a long time. I knew them much better. That was part of the transaction issue we had, is that we brought in new um, leadership, but maybe there was still a us versus them kind of mentality, and we needed to move past that. I always go back to the financial side of the business. You have to know your numbers. If you don't, how can you make decisions? And you got to know month to month, year to year history. History shows you this. This is what it did. We did last year. This is why we did it. And if you don't know those things, as a CEO, your CFO can give you spreadsheets, but you better know the ins and outs of them,
Yeah.
because some of the decisions you make are, um, you have to have a little gut, but you have to have a backup to that gut. And so and that's where I learned a lot, is just really how you make those decisions with knowledge. I always like to say I don't like to go into a test without the answers. So I always would do my homework beforehand, and I would always work with. I always would ask questions to my people that I knew the answers to. And if they
Hmm.
didn't know, I had a problem. And
Right.
so, and I made sure they knew that, is that, I did my homework. You should do your homework as well. And so, don't come in to see me if you didn't read the book and I already did. And so that's where I tried to teach them is that, again, you have to know everything behind that before you come pitch me on something, because I already, I worked hard to make sure I knew the information as well.
That's a fantastic thing I want to reinforce to our audience. I think that's you got to know the numbers behind the numbers. You got to understand the why, the changes, the challenges, and go deeper. So I love that you got to make decisions by knowledge and knowing your information. So I love that. The last question I always like to ask is, what do you want to be known for?
What do I want to be known for? I have no interest in being known for how much what I own, where I live, what I drive. Okay, those are the three things I could care less about. I want to be known for what I gave back to my local community more than anything. My dad always had a saying. It was important for him to pay his civic rent, and I learned that pretty early. He's like, okay, first off, I was like, what are you even talking about? And then he's like, you got to give back to the people that helped you get to where you are.
Mhm.
And if it's the local city, the local community, whatever it is, if it's helping at the food bank, coaching your kid's soccer team, working on that, working at the schools, whatever, all that pays you back. And that's more important to me, that someone knows me for those activities in any business. Because the businesses, like I said, the businesses help you get to a stage in your life to do things, but to be known as someone that took care of people, took care of his family, first off, took care of other people, that's the most important thing to me.
I love it. I love it. That's a great legacy to leave. I love that. I really appreciate your time. I want to share a few things just to remind our audience some of the learnings that we've had here. A couple things that I wrote down is you got to learn to be humble, and you've got to make sure that you're being relationship minded. You've got to trust other people. You've got to have that relationship so you can build that future of the business. I loved what you said about you know, um, diving into the information. You got to dive in, you've got to understand it, you've got to believe it, and you've got to make sure that you are clear to help you make decisions. And so I think that's powerful. And the last thing I'll share is being even keeled. You got to watch your emotions. You got to keep steady and not let your emotions get to you and make good decisions. So really appreciate your insight. Love your career that you've had, and congratulations on your success of how you're influencing your community and being a part of your family as well. So really appreciate it.
Great. But again, thanks for having me on, Money. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Again, thanks for watching our show. Look forward to chatting some more. And remember to like and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day.